Good evening. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Tanya, and today we're going to be talking about the important organizational development issue of how managers allocate resources. So, as you've heard, we seem to have a bit of a financial problem, and student retention is a big issue because we have declining enrollment, and most of our revenue comes from undergraduate tuition. And I recall the town hall back in, was it the spring, where faculty and staff were asked to donate part of their paycheck back to the employer, because SMU is also a charity, or it has a charitable registration. And I remember there was an event, there was tea and coffee and donuts, and the president and the vice presidents were there, and there was a billboard where one of those flip charts, right, where we were asked to write down, why we were donating back to SMU. And then I remember that email that went out in June about the big $1 million budget cut, and it made a strong point that, we're in this together. Like, we all have to tighten our belts because we're a community. There's that principle of community. And then there was a list of some changes that were about to happen related to employment. And it was clear that faculty were not impacted. But there was going to be a hiring freeze on staff. And now some profs sort of don't get too far outside of their own departments, but if you work with staff, you might have noticed that there's pretty high turnover and high workloads. And they're paid, I would say, less than the market rate. I would guess about maybe 10 or 20% less. So there's a hiring freeze on the staff, and it struck me as strange that, well, we're a community, but some of us are protected and some of us are not. It's almost as if, we're all equal, but some of us are more equal than others. As you would know from the posters, PB 3912 is in negotiations for a new collective agreement headed towards conciliation on January the 10th. And we've done some surveying of our members. Most of our members are either racialized or women, part-time instructors. And at the Mount, which paid more than St. Mary's, when we asked them to track their hours, when you consider the stipend that they're paid, it works out to an average of $16 an hour. And now, you would know from what you're paying at the pump and what you're paying for groceries that kind of getting harder and harder to pay those bills. So if you're earning $16 an hour on average, and that was done, I don't know, was that maybe a year or two ago? A living wage could be a real issue for your part-time instructors. We have been offered, over the next 4-year collective agreement, wage increases of 0.5%. 0.75%, 1%, and 1%. So if you add those up, that's like a 3% increase over 4 years. But what is the inflation rate per year on average? On average, it's about 3.1%. But things are happening in the world, like a war, and it's 7% this year and projected to be 8% next year. So that's actually a pay cut for people who are not really making a living wage, many of whom have PhDs. You might think that if you get a PhD and this person seems to be a professor, that they're doing really well. That's true for some of your teachers, but about 50% of your teachers are part-time instructors. It was interesting that when all this was going down, there's these budget cuts, and we're asked to even let the university take a cut of our paychecks towards their they're charitable activities, I suppose. But it was explained to me when I asked about this, that apparently that money that's given to them charitably can be used for, say, the operating budget. I thought it was interesting that in the middle of all this, with high staff turnover, folks feeling a bit overworked and underpaid, and all this business about the $1 million budget cut, it struck me as interesting that there was so much work on the lawn. So if we have no money, how can we be affording to do all this seeding and sprinkling and this business where the clouds had gone and scraped the sides of the grass and there was salt, and now we're going to resod that? I thought it was strange that there was money for that. And so I was very interested, to read the Association of Nova Scotia University Teachers report on administrative compensation. ANSUT is an association of full-time faculty, contract faculty, and librarians at 8 Nova Scotian universities, including SMU. And the report looks at the compensation and quantity of senior and upper level administration for these 8 universities. And there's a link there. You can Google that and read the report, which is publicly available. So the first report was written in 2012, and it was created because that there was a concern about the lack of public accountability in how university funding is administered. And it's kind of fair to ask for public accountability because it's a public institution that is publicly funded by the provincial government, Department of Labor and Advanced Education. And the students, the undergraduate students, are members of the public, right? We're saying that we're going to teach you guys things that you'll be the better for it, and you'll go out and be global citizens, right? So it feels like it's about the public interest. And so there should be public accountability. And the concern was on the remuneration and hiring practices of senior level administrators at post-secondary education institutions like this one. And what that report found, the first one, was that over the last 6 years, there have been increases in compensation of up to 45%. And that there was an increase also in the number of administrators. And it's not just salary, it's also about bonuses and allowances and perks. Right? Allowances for housing, or vehicles, or recreation. And so they've just updated this report 10 years later. And what do you think they're going to find? What do you think, Mark? Did the problem get better or worse?
It will get worse or stay the same.
Huh? Why wouldn't it get better?
I don't know.
Not seeing any trends towards increased public accountability? No, probably not. All right. So the provincial government does have an agreement with the universities about how the money is going to be spent. And so there's something called a memorandum of understanding. But that memorandum of understanding actually has very little accountability built into it, especially regarding executive compensation. And ANSUT notes that the 2019, the most recent MOU, makes no mention of executive compensation, enabling university administrators to spend the funds on post-secondary education as they see fit. I wonder what they'll do with it. So how did they get the data? They used FOIPOP requests. Does anyone know what a FOIPOP request is?
Freedom of information, protection of privacy.
And actually, I've done one with the university. I asked for my own personal records that were to be saved according to a written policy. And they told me that my own records were confidential from me. They refused to give them. And then when I challenged that, because how can my personal information be confidential from me? Then they said they couldn't find the records. So just because something is ostensibly personal information, you FOIPOP for it, kind of doesn't mean you're going to get it. And I could escalate that, but it's kind of a lot of work, right? But now they had better work. And they got some data, good data. They asked for org charts. They asked for salary expenses for each position listed in the chart. They said, you know, we want this information in an Excel file. They asked for positions on the university leadership team. They asked for information on administrative and management positions that were not included in the above. And they also asked for information on bonus and allowance expense accounts for each position. And they also looked at other publicly available information on websites, like contracts and compensation packages for presidents. Most of us probably don't read that stuff that's there. So they found that over the last 10 years, overall at these 8 universities, administrative and upper level compensation rose 84%. And you can compare that to whatever you think inflation might have been over the last 10 years. Sounds like they're doing a little better than inflation to me. There's a 41% increase in president's salaries, a 76% increase on vice president's salaries, 86% increase on dean's salaries, 88% increase on managers and directors' salaries, and 119% increase in salaries for executive assistants, university council, registrars, some other staff. Mark, have you seen that kind of an increase in your salary?
Oh.
No, why not? Haven't your skills been developing over the last 10 years?
I believe so.
So I wonder why their salaries are increasing at such a sharper rate compared to everyone else's. Now, there has actually been a 17% increase in faculty salaries over that time period, and that's probably appropriate given inflation. But I don't think there's been a 17% increase in part-time instructor salaries. There's also been an increase in the number of positions. So you're paying more money to more positions. There's been a 46% increase in the number of these. There's been a 66% increase in the number of directors. There's been a 93% increase in the number of managers and supervisors, and an 88% increase in those other high-level positions. We can compare that to a 9% increase in student enrollment. So what's the reason for having more administrators? Would it be having more students? More students create more problems. They need administrators to handle. And there's been a 52% increase in tuition fees. And if you folks are paying tuition here, and consider that international students pay 2 or 3 times as much tuition for the same services, well, where's that going? Where's that money going? Are you getting a 52% better education? All right, so you can see the 8 universities here and how the amount paid to university senior administration and upper management. And you can see there's 3 different periods here, 2011, 12, 2014, 15, and 2020, 21, which is the most recent period. You can see that SME spent almost $10 million, and that's a 70% increase since 2012. So it seems like there is some money. Now, let's look at the different kinds of compensation. So what does the president earn? The president will earn a salary, and I think it's something like 325 or 340, somewhere thereabouts, thousand. So that's just the salary. Well, then there's going to be bonuses. There are performance incentives, pension benefits, allowances for housing, auto, research. Mark, do you get any allowance for your housing or your car?
Don't have a car. But I wouldn't if I did.
Research, relocation, professional development.
There are allowances for research and professional development.
Okay. Cool. Professional fees. And then there's an administrative leave. And so if they serve a 5-year term, they have a year or 2 years where they're paid a full salary and benefits, while there's a new president as well. So the university would be paying the departed president who left their salary for usually about a year, like 2 years in some places, and you're paying the new incumbent, so you're paying twice a president's salary in a year like that. I was wondering if that administrative leave is a bit like, is it a bit like sabbatical?
Well, it is, and it's the same structure for department chairs. They get administrative leave as well. A percentage of their salary, no teaching research duties, and the new chair, of course, gets the extra chair stipend.
Is that a bit like sabbatical?
Yeah, well,
Kind of?
yeah, except you don't apply for administrative leave. It's granted you.
Okay.
You have to apply for a sabbatical.
And then the administrative leave, I understand, racks up. So you can have 3 terms as a president, 3 5-year terms, and you can get 3 years of administrative leave. Is that how that would work?
I don't know about that, just about the chair of the department, but that doesn't rack up. You got to take it.
Okay.
Or you use it or lose it.
I believe the president's leaves racks up. So SMU paid almost $600,000 in president's salary in 2016. Sorry, I don't know why I have that in the wrong place. So they paid that in 2016 because they were paying Colin Dodds his administrative leave and Robert Murray for his first year as president. So SMU saw a 22% increase in the president's salary over this 10-year period. And this is interesting. The current contract for Dr. Summerby Murray at SMU limits salary increases for the president to those negotiated by the faculty. That was a 1.6% increase in 2020-21. Sounds reasonable, but now this contract includes a performance incentive program. And the details of that are created by the President Performance and Compensation Committee of the Board of Governors to reward exceptional performance. So the Board of Governors sounds, I don't know if I'm reading this correctly, that the Board of Governors created something else that might be, say, larger for compensation. So is the faculty union really limiting this? If the Board of Governors is doing its own thing? When student enrollment declined during the early days of the pandemic, concessions appeared to fall mainly on faculty and staff. At SMU, the president received an 8.6% raise. And that's less than the 13% that was expected, with the cost savings redirected to a financial relief fund. At the same time, faculty were asked to give up salary steps and cost of living increases and waive their travel funds. President's contracts also cover possibilities for termination, including termination without cause. I'm wondering, like politically, if somebody's terminated without cause, does that really mean there is cause? We just don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it just means we're not publicly saying what it is. We're just dismissing you.
But you're done.
Yeah.
Okay, and I imagine if this happened, it's because
See, if it's with cause, then the university doesn't have to compensate. Because the guy's done something wrong and so he gets fired.
Okay.
But if without cause, you want to fire him.
Yeah.
But you don't have anything that you can take to a labor board or whatever that whatever oversees this to say that it's legitimate to fire him.
I wonder if
So you buy him out.
okay, but I wonder if with cause would also disclose things that could be a liability in other ways.
You could just choose to fire him without cause, and that way not have to reveal something, even if you could get away with firing him with that for cause.
So many things to think about. But when that happens, there's actually a generous payout, including 1 year's salary as well as outstanding administration leave. Doesn't sound so bad, getting fired. Here are the vice president salaries for the 8 universities. And at SMU, you can see that in the 2021 year, we spent $1.2 million. No, sorry, that's $1.6 million. And that's a 98% increase from over 10 years. For deans, associate, assistant, and vice deans, we spent about $1 million in the most recent period, and that's a 111% increase. For directors, we paid $3.6 million, and that's a 72% increase over the last 10 years. For managers, we paid $2.2 million. That's a 44% increase. And then for all those other sundry high-level positions, we paid about $800,000, and that is an 81% increase. Now, what about enrollment? You can see that some universities have much higher enrollment over the last 10 years, like Cape Breton University. Some of them seem pretty stable. I don't know, 16%, 15% increase at Acadia. And then some of them are losing students hard. Looks like the Atlantic School of Theology has a bigger retention problem than us. And you can see, and so does NASCAD, that's an art school. But you can see that we are one of the 3 universities that has negative percent change. And I understand that the retention problem has increased since this time period. So here you can see the information from the report summarized at a glance. So over the last 10 years, number of faculty has stayed about the same. We have fewer students, 8% less students, and a 44% increase in the number of administrators. Mark, what do you think? What are the extra administrators for? What are they doing? How do these positions get created?
I do not know.
Do they just kind of happen out of the blue? One day you get an email saying, "Congratulations, so and so is the new AVP of some such."
That was what was happening 3-4 years ago. Yes, out of the blue, we get email messages telling us that a new position has been created.
And here's the incumbent, and please join me in congratulating.
Yep.
So they're losing students, but they're hiring more people.
Mm-hmm. And the positions might not be posted. There's just a mass email one day that somebody has come into a position. And so that means that it's a political appointment. And what I would want to see as, a public servant in a public body is that you justify the position. You say, this is why we need to create this job. And there's a job description, and maybe there's been some risk management analysis or some financial analysis of some kind that says, yeah, this is a good idea. And then you open it for public competition. So everybody has a chance to apply for it. And then there's some kind of a competence selection process, perhaps with the assistance of HR, and you choose the best person for the job. Mark said no to HR having anything to do with this. I think it's better than just having somebody's buddy get a job, which is what happens now, right? There's cliques of people like and trust each other, and they favor each other. And I imagine that if somebody gets a cushy job like this, it's because they're being rewarded, perhaps for their loyalty. Any other thoughts on why this happens?
Offloading from professors is one of the reasons we have things like writing centers. I don't know if that counts.
No, the writing center wouldn't count in here. Just there was a director of the writing center, but that position was restructured away.
Yeah.
And I believe replaced with a lower level person who was a coordinator, and that salary would not figure into this.
Yeah, so Brian is sure.
Yes. In a restructuring. I'm aware that before this restructuring, I'm aware from a few cases that there were kind of email complaints about people. And you'd think, according to our policies, that you get to read the written complaint about you, especially since it's your personal information. According to the FOIPOP Act, my opinion of you is your personal information. But instead of the person being aware of this, there's some kind of political decision that maybe this person, what they want is not in line with the vision. And then there's a restructuring. And this is actually very common in organizational development and in organizational transformation. It's routine. I don't know if it's fair, and it makes me feel like the policies on complaint was performative, which I think I already knew from my own experience, but that was disappointing. I also remember the town hall where we heard that, it's not about the people, it's about the positions. But there's always a person in the position. An organizational structure is made of positions that have job descriptions, job titles, but there's always a person in them. So one way that managers can get rid of a person is to get rid of the position, because these things are attached to the hip. So I felt that it was a little disingenuous, and I think it eroded some of my sense of trust after I saw that, and just kind of knowing how things had gone down on the back end, I thought, yuck. So there's some limitations to the study. This data, they say, is only a small part of total administrative funding. So it's more than this. So they couldn't collect every piece of information. When you write a FOIPOP request, they're hard to write. You have to use that, what is that, like Boolean language. The first time I did it, I had a librarian help me with it, because you only get what you ask for. So this doesn't include expenses for support staff, office expenses, travel. And another thing they noted was challenging in putting this report together is that it can be hard to compare titles and ranks across universities. So questions I was thinking about is, well, if we have 8% less students, then why do we need 44% more managers of various kinds? Like what's going on there? What are they dealing with that's more complicated? Like, has there been some legislation and now you need some office to handle that? Like what's going on?
Because that 8% means, roughly 600 people, right? So
I could be wrong about this. So I'm suggesting that the number of administrators should be tied to the number of students, but I could be wrong about that. And I believe it's Yale, there's a 1-to-1 administrator to student ratio. There's one administrator for every student. And that might be because they make tons and tons of money and they spend it by just like hiring lots of people. But could life have gotten more complicated here to the point that we legitimately need more administrators to figure things out? Or are we making work? Is there inefficiency? Are there more people to deal with more inefficiency? What's going on? I don't know. Interesting about the president's 22% performance bonus. If you're an instructor, let's say you're an instructor like me and you get paid a flat rate of about $5,000 for a class, there are a lot of things I've done in my intro psych class to support student success. Things like onboarding to career services, onboarding to counseling services, onboarding to the Fred Smithers Center, bringing in guest lectures. I was teaching content from the university's student success text and working with folks from student services, setting up accommodations and even meeting with students' disability advisors to make sure that the right accommodations were set up. Another thing I did was use the early assist program. So if I noticed that some student was not handing things in, I'd follow up. And then if things didn't change, I'd refer them to the early assist program with the Dean of Science office. And that was a lot of work. Like doing all that turned what's supposed to be a 10-hour-a-week job into far, far more than that. And there were other reasons I spent so much time on it, but I imagine that I probably worked 70-hour weeks and earned about $5 an hour. And let's say that was good for the university. Let's say those students liked it and they liked being cared about. Well, what's the incentive for me? Where's my performance bonus for doing that? There's this expectation that we support student success, and student success is it's a way of saying retention. Am I supposed to do that out of goodness of my heart? You do a bit of that, but when you have a class of 100, that's a lot of work, and there's no compensation for it. But there is a sense of entitlement that we ought to do it. But I look at the incentives for me. If I have a class with an enrollment capacity of 30 and 9 students stayed in it, there is no incentive for me to go out and find another 20 students. And some instructors do that. They'll put up posters advertising their class. And I could do that. And I could say, hey, this is an open book class and there's flexible deadlines. I'm sure I could get all 30 people. But then, well, I'd have a lot more email. I'd have a lot more issues coming up. It's a lot more people to get to know. And the university is not giving me a performance bonus for any success, any institutional success associated with that at all. And I don't get a year of paid leave after 5 years of doing that either. In fact, I've never gotten a thank you. I get it from students, which is lovely, but certainly not from administration. So I'm supposed to do extra work to support the good of the institution for no pay. And that gets cut out of something, right? I don't have endless, bottomless time. That means I see less of my friends. It means I see less of my family. I have less time to clean my house. What about taking care of myself or exercise? Right? All that gets kind of sacrificed for these student success projects when there's no reinforcement from the administration for doing that. And I think that it's very rewarding, and that's why we do it. But I do want you to see this picture where the administrators probably feel like they're doing very, very important work, and they are entitled to pay increases and entitled to leave. But further down the hierarchy, no, it's just expected. The report takes a public service position, which I can appreciate. Said that the provincial government has a responsibility to ensure that administrators are spending tax dollars widely. Okay, and that should be in the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding. So all it says is that universities must use the funding to advance educational quality and achieve outcomes outlined in the outcome agreements. But what are those? Speaking with the president of King's a couple of days ago, and wasn't very impressed with these outcome measures. And what I heard, I haven't read the MOU or the outcome measure documents, is that there's a focus on jobs. So are the graduates getting jobs? Mark, I think you don't think that's the mission of a university.
Absolutely not.
No.
Absolutely not. No.
So what do you think would be a good outcome measure for
I don't
university
know.
performance?
University administrators on one side, the government on the other side. Do I really have to choose?
There could be.
I don't like either of those options.
What about like a great philosophy exam? It'd be like a standardized philosophy exam if you'd score on that.
No.
Standardized test of logic. So the Auditor General found that the province is not regularly monitoring the financial health of universities. And that there's no common strategic direction for sustainability among the university. There's no standard reporting requirements. And overall, culture of very little accountability. We can ask what happens in a climate where there's little accountability and really big power differences. We can ask, what is an organization? We often talk about an organization as if it's a person, and we'll say SMU values this, and the university is concerned by that. And when you think about it, the only people who can care, who can think, who can feel concerned are people with brains. In a hierarchical organization, especially one with very big power differences, and we are a high power distance culture, right? You have your professors and your doctors and all that, and your fancy administrators, and some people have fancy offices, and there's faculty only parking, and some people have a system, right? You see these power differences. So when we talk about the institution and loyalty to the institution, I will note that members of the board of governors have to sign something stating that they will be loyal to the institution. What does that mean if the institution isn't a person? Who are you being loyal to? And is it really just a small group of decision makers on the top? The industrial psychologist Arthur Kornhauser argued in 1947 that management is a special interest group. Now in my organizational development class, I teach socio-technical systems theory. Say that an organization has 5 subsystems. These being, so one of them is like the sort of goals, vision. One of them is the psychosocial. That's things like culture. One of them is the technical subsystem, and that's things like for teaching, it'd be like the whiteboard and this projection software and the Zoom over there. Okay, and then what's the other one? Someone in OD getting goals and values. Structural. So that's like the organizational design. Organizational design being your hierarchical system structure that's made of positions and reporting relationships, all of which contain people with hearts, minds, and brains. Okay. An organization is defined as an entity that consists of one or more people. So it can be an organization of one, like sole proprietorship, that has a common purpose. Organization is made of people with a purpose. And the 5th subsystem is the managerial subsystem. And the point of the managerial subsystem is to coordinate all the other subsystems towards achieving organizational goals, which should be the health of the organization and fulfilling its mission. You can ask, what is the mission and who gets to contribute to that? What they're supposed to do is coordinate everyone towards achieving the mission and living the values and heading towards the vision. That's the ideal. Kornhauser argued that in fact, management is a special interest group, right, of folks with class privilege. And that the decisions they make tend to disproportionately favor themselves over the common good. And looking at these results, I wonder, you might have been onto something. And Kornhauser was a big union guy. So here are the recommendations of the report. Recommendation 1, university leaders are encouraged to engage faculty, students, and staff in creation of regulations on university spending, including regulations to limit the portion of university spending that can be used for administrative expenses. What if we all had a conversation that said how much of the total budget can go to paying the administrators? Administrators should work with these stakeholders to further recommendations of the Nova Scotia Auditor General. Recommendation 2, university leaders are encouraged to work together to establish transparent standard reporting structures for all Nova Scotia universities, including breakdowns of operating and salary expenses, instruction, and research. folks who wrote this report did a lot of work in coming up with these tables and trying to figure out how the information would fit into these tables. And maybe we should set that all out clearly. Recommendation 3, university leaders should include student and faculty input on development to regular MOUs between the province and the universities. Yeah, I would certainly like to have input on that. And I wonder if the stakeholders could be even broader than student and faculty. What about staff? Why do we keep forgetting about staff? And why is there no staff reserve department here? I understand that the Board of Governors created a position for a staff member, but just to observe. No vote, can't do anything. And I wonder, what's the point of that? Is it just performative? We have a staff person here, just not allowed to do anything. Staff matter. You know, I really learned that when I started exploring the institution. Like, there are folks in student services and in the records office and who make this place go. Recommendation 4. At the completion of the provincial review of university governance, the administrator should work with government, faculty, staff, students, and the community to implement best practices that foster collegial governance. Why would they say that? Collegial governance. Include dedicated spaces for these stakeholders on university boards and limit the voting powers of senior administrative staff to sit on the board. The university has, I think it's called a bicameral system of government. So there's the board. Mark, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't understand these things very well, but there's a board,
Yeah.
the board of governors.
Yeah.
What kind of folks sit on the board of governors? Just business people?
Business people, there are a few faculty members as well, but it's mainly business people seated at the pleasure of different organizations named in the enabling legislation from the provincial government.
Oh, so probably like someone from the Catholic Church.
There are, I think, 3 or 4 people seated by groups from the Catholic Church. The government seats some, the Alumni Association seats some. I forget exactly what it is, but the Nova Scotia legislation creating St. Mary's University in 1970 or whatever specifies the groups. The Jesuits in Ontario were seating a person, but they said they didn't have any interest anymore, so that came in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Colin Dodds told me that he doesn't mind that the Roman Catholic Church is seating people, because if it wasn't that, it would be the government. And he thinks that the church does a better job of choosing responsible people than the government would. So.
I don't know if I would agree with that.
But
So, but the point is, I think that the Board of Governors is concerned about things like keeping the lights on.
finance, yeah, money,
Yeah.
that's their, yeah. They gotta keep
Keeping
the
the
place running.
wolves from the gates.
Right.
And then the Senate, what do they do? Who are they and what do they do? Who's on
Academic
the
Senate is the top academic decision-making board at the university.
So academic decision-making board
Mhm.
means, I'm just trying to unpack this for the OD students who are listening. What's an academic decision?
How many credit hours for a degree? Whether the department gets to decide something or the dean gets to decide it, but anything that has to do with the educational
All right.
function of the institution. But then there's that third arm, the union, right?
And there's like what, how many unions? 7 or there's probably 5
Yeah.
staff unions, 2 faculty.
The faculty union for permanent faculty, the Canadian Association of University Teachers is advocating that unions take on the roles of Senate. Because the unions think that the senates are more administrative tools than they are representative of faculty concerns. But yes, so there's a bit of a, I mean, what does the union's got the collective agreement. The collective agreement is worked out with the president, that is the Board of Governors. But the collective agreement is the binding document, and that can sideline Senate.
Oh, fascinating. I didn't know that. Thank you. Okay, so let me just understand this bicameral thing. There's the Board of Governors, there's Senate and faculty are on Senate. Are
Yeah.
there staff on Senate?
Yes, but I don't think the staff are voting members of Senate. What's
Okay.
unfortunate is that ex officio members, the deans, the academic vice president, the registrar, are voting members of Senate. Now, the problem is that they serve in those positions at the pleasure of the president. So they're a block.
Is he easily displeased?
They can't, they have no independence as senators. If they don't vote the way the president wants them to, then they lose their position as dean or academic vice president.
Really?
Well,
So they have no freedom.
I mean, if they do it often enough, right? Because the president's going to say, well, I can't kick them off because it's a pain in the neck to replace them. But yes, the case of the dean at the University of Regina a while ago, where he spoke against an administrative policy that was coming through Senate. Well, he was no longer dean.
Oh, and
So that they don't have full independence as members of Senate.
so when he's told that he's no longer dean, how does that decision happen?
Well, the academic administrators serve at the pleasure of the president.
And so he just says, I am no longer pleased with you, be gone? Is it
There you go. That's it.
capricious?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
His name was Buckingham, and they said that this was Buckingham next.
Oh my. I feel like these deans need to unionize and get a collective agreement.
No,
Since you can't do that.
No, academic administrators are not.
Yeah,
union
they
members
can't
of
be
the
because they're
union.
management.
Yeah.
Sounds to me like these high level folks don't have as much power as I imagine.
Well, except it's all in balance because
they themselves are servants of greater-
if there's a reaction against a president, the
Yeah.
Board of Governors is going to know about this. The Board of Governors might say that the president has to go rather
Where's
than
the ultimate seat of power?
well, the Board of Governors with regard to
The Board of
hiring and firing of academic administrators like the president,
Hey,
so the president does the hiring and the firing, but the Board of Governors can hire and fire the president.
so is the president a puppet of the Board of Governors?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Different universities, different power. There's sometimes power struggles. Sometimes they get along, sometimes they don't.
So what does this recommendation say in that context?
Recommendation 4?
Yeah,
Well, collegial governance just means the administration and the Senate,
Board and Senate.
the board and the Senate.
So we want them to have a collegial relationship. Sounds like they might
No,
not.
it's not a collegial relation. The collegial use there just means, the two bodies have rights and responsibilities and are in some sense equal.
Okay. Include dedicated spaces for these stakeholders on university boards? Oh, the stakeholders being faculty, staff, and students. Oh, they're saying faculty, staff, and students should be on the Board of Governors. And limit the voting powers of senior administrative staff that sit on the board.
Mm-hmm.
This is all about the limiting of power. Okay. Recommendation 5. Universities should commit to paying a living wage to all employees. What an idea. And service providers under third-party contract. Some of the folks who are a regular part of our landscape here are working under some contract relationship. So the cafeteria staff would be working for, say, the Sodexo. Same with the Tim Hortons staff. University leaders should move to prevent precarious employment at their institutions. I think this is a reference to part-time, probably to part-time academics, but then there's also a lot of contract staff. So if you're a research assistant, you have a contract that's for a few months and then you don't know what's going to happen after that because the position is grant paid. And about half your teachers are part-time academics who are, would say, precariously employed. So if you're teaching a class in September, you might know what you're doing in January, you might not. You certainly don't know what you're doing next September. There is something called a precedence list. So after you've taught 4 times, it's you get on something called a precedence list. It means you kind of get, the higher you are up that list, the more priority you get. But if you don't apply for the job, So you have to reapply for your own job. One instructor, her parents were sick, and so she forgot to apply for it and then didn't get it. That's too late, sorry. So that's what precariously employed means. Further recommendations. The report concludes that while administrative structure and oversight are necessary and vital functions of our universities, the increases in compensation that administrators employed by Nova Scotia Universities receive is blatantly excessive. Recommendations of the report include limiting the portion of university budgets that can be spent on administration, creating transparent and standard reporting structures, seeking the inclusion of student and faculty input in the development of MOUs, working with boards to implement best practices to reduce corporatization and foster collegial governance, and committing to pay living wages and remove precarious employment practices for all university employees. I think that's not further recommendations, that's probably a summary of all 5 recommendations. But you can see that not earning a living wage actually is a big issue for half your teachers. Here are some of my own. I feel like if there's going to be a new administrative position, that needs to be justified. Like there should be a mandate, right? And there should be a job description. There should be meaningful stakeholder consultation. So maybe before you create the position, you invite people to have, I don't know, a focus group on whatever the issue is that the position is being created for. And you know what? Maybe the way you handle that issue isn't by creating a new administrative position. Maybe it's something else. But it'd be great to have more consultation. And I would say also less performative consultation. Can you really trying to go out of your way to go to some of these consultations and to give your input, go into that breakout Zoom room, meet people, talk to people, give good feedback, and then where does that go? And it seems that what happens is that there's some political decision, some political appointment, and that's not what we talked about in the consultation. But then they can say, oh, well, there was a consultation. There was a consultation. Statements like there was a consultation, there is a process, doesn't mean that that was a good quality consultation and that you've used and applied the data appropriately. The fact that there is a process doesn't mean your process is good. Your process could be iatrogenic. So we need to do better than that. I think this should also include staff positions that are created under the portfolio of an administrator. So that we can't just create a new job and put our friend there. It's not an administrative position, but it's connected to an administrative position. And I noticed that sometimes these positions fall into strange places according to the organizational design. I think, hey, that position really should be in that department, but it's not. It's under the portfolio of your ally. I think that these jobs need to be open for public competition, to have good, fair, and transparent processes for hiring. I think we need to show more respect for the HR function. Mark, you can disagree with me.
I will.
You will? Okay, let's disagree. There's a professional body for HR practitioners called the Chartered Professionals in Human Resources, and they have their code of ethics, and
They don't understand universities.
They don't understand universities.
They might
have fear about HR folks. Tell me, because I'm an HR consultant. I'm ready to listen.
No, it has seemed to me that the HR people at St. Mary's that I've met over the years do not understand what a university is for. They have, there's organizations, and they don't know that a university is a very different sort of place, or is.
I see a lot of this siloing. Sometimes I feel that faculty don't really respect staff and what staff function is and what their job is. I've noticed some of that too. There's a lot of siloing.
That's terrible. Faculty should respect staff and understand what they're doing.
Yeah, I've noticed some of that.
Mm-hmm. I've said a few times that the rot set in when personnel changed its name to human resources.
Really?
Yeah.
But that could reflect some kind of a value shift,
It
like,
did, that's the
Okay.
problem.
okay, so.
Well,
debate
here's
on
the problem.
Yes,
Collegial in the other sense,
right.
not collegial as opposed to corporate, right?
Mhm.
But collegial in the other sense, collegial relations among professors, among students, between professors and students. These are relations between people as individuals.
Yeah,
A serious problem is when we designate people as overseers. And then the relation is a relation between you and the overseer and the other person. This, I think, is a human resources model of how things go, that we need that layer of people who are the conduits between the other people.
okay,
So I want faculty members, professors and students to be interacting with each other as professors and students, or professors and professors and all the rest.
without all these sort of extra policies and things.
Right, without oversight that has some authority on the quality of this relationship.
Questioning that oversight and authority, because in my experience, our policy for conflict resolution, discrimination, harassment was performative. Like there's this multi-page document saying what's going to happen, and that's not what happens, right? Complaints go to the university lawyer, and then the university lawyer picks holes in it and acts like the university is a defendant, and this is not very pleasant for somebody that's maybe had a traumatic experience. That is not what you would believe from reading the policy. So when that happens, I wonder how much respect do we have for the HR folks if they're just overruled by administrators making decisions that are informed by university lawyers.
Right.
Like, do we respect them at all if we do that? And then I thought that maybe we could have a new administrative position. Could we use an associate vice president, accountability excellence? And then I'm going to leave you with a final thought. I hear a lot about decolonizing. Many acknowledgements at the start of meetings and email signatures. Just at that event we were at, how it started, that say that we're in Mi'kmaq, that this is Shavukcha, that we're on Eternal Island. So I ask you, what does our lawn symbolize? What do lawns symbolize? What are they symbolic of? Every blade of grass looks the same, right? Control, uniformity, conformity. And you know, the grass seed comes from Europe. And there's weeding. You have to get rid of a lot of native plants, a lot of biodiversity, and they need sprinklers and aren't the most sustainable way of doing things. So sometimes I wonder what we should be doing about this unceded land problem I hear about so much. So, well, should we be paying rent to the local indigenous groups for using their land? Could we, as you suggested, petition the provincial government to make the university campus an extension of the reservation? Could we give the land back? And maybe those folks would have an opinion on how we care for their land and what values that we express when we do that. Thank you for your attention. Are there any comments or questions that be on record? No.
You did know the pun in unseated, right, when you were talking about the lawn.
No, I
No.
didn't. Har har. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording now, and we can have some more informal discussion.
I do have to go.